I know it's not the traditional introduction for a speaker, what I'll do now, but I want everybody really now to thank Gili for what she's doing, because having the conference this year, such an incredible conference, is only thanks to her devotion. Believe that that's the time that we need to demonstrate the strength of the industry and actually showing and executing. So honestly, Gili, thank you so much for what you're doing for us. We are so glad, we are so honored for the third year to partner with the Blavatnik Center and the Cyber Week, which Gili is the executive director, Gili Dvor-Heichten, but her role is much more than executive director. She actually leads the fact that as a country, we have this trade show, demonstration of the strength of the industry, and she's doing it. Everybody worked with her. There's no greater pleasure than to partner with Gili and her team. Thank you so much for your partnership, and welcoming notes by Gili Dvor-Heichten.
Wow, such compliments. Thank you. Okay, so sorry for the delay because we just started AI week, so I was the main plenary welcoming the audience. So good morning to you all and welcome to Crisis Management event. Thank you for the warm words, my friends. For those of you who don't know me, as Nimrod just said, I'm the Executive Director of the Blavatnik Interdisciplinary Cyber Research Center, Tel Aviv University, and the Yuval Ne'eman Workshop for Science, Technology, and Security, proud hosts and creators of AI Week and Cyber Week. We have continued this contribution by attracting cyber leaders from all over the world for a week of a dialogue, networking, discussion, and meetings. However, this year it's different as we face difficult times, and we cannot forget for a moment our hostages that are still held in Gaza, and we all hope that they'll return safely home. So just remember that. Despite everything, we are here together, a testament to the resilience of Israel. The conference today is dealing with the complexity of crisis management during cyber attacks. Addressing a cyber crisis is a multidisciplinary challenge, and it requires addressing various aspects at the same time: cybersecurity, legal, PR, insurance, management. So it's a lot of topics, and you'll cover it through the day. Especially, these topics are especially important during a time of war. So I guess you have something to talk about today. Before we begin, I would like to thank Nimrod Kozlovsky, my dear friend, and of course Manny Barzilai, the one and the only. Manny, you are a superstar. Thank you for yesterday. I want to thank you personally for your contribution to our conference, and you are a true friend. So you all know what an amazing lineup of speakers we have for you today. So let's get started and enjoy the day and the rest of the week, Cyber Week, as well as AI Week. Thank you. By the way, we have this afternoon, just for you to know, Ivri leader Izar Ashdod will be here in a special session, the AI, so a smallish auditorium. Please come, generative AI. This is a topic, music during generative. So come and thank you so much. Thank you.
For those of you who missed this year RSA, there was a real Israeli star at RSA. I asked Ofer Maor, the founder and the CTO of Mitiga, the leading cloud investigation and readiness platform, to share with us what he did on stage at RSA. But actually at RSA he presented Mitiga. We were so proud of the Israelis. There were 3,000 people at the audience and many tens of thousands around the world watching it live. And he actually was chosen by everybody as the best actually new startup to present at RSA. Incredible show. I asked him today, my dear friend, if he can share with us his thoughts about the economics of prevention versus response. The Mitiga story. Thank you very much, Ofer.
So I don't know what's harder, to get on stage after these words or after many. because I always promise myself I will never speak after Manny, and now I failed this. But actually, Manny's talk is really a good setup for this, because what I'm going to talk today a lot about is how to think about making an incident or a breach something that is not such a big crisis that you have to get personally liable for it. Okay, so let's start. So I want to start with this because this is one of the most important things. We spend so much resources, money, energy on trying to prevent incidents, right? And yet when a major breach is discovered, in most cases, it's not discovered by us. All this great technology, people, everything we have, and they get in and we hear about it from somebody else. We hear about it from the news, we hear about it from the attacker, we hear about it from the police or from a third party. And so I'm gonna share a lot of data here. This is from IBM's Cost of Data Breach report. They publish it every year. Always good, interesting data there. This is not a new piece of data, but it's repetitive. And why is that important? It's important because it means something we're doing is obviously not helping us solve the problem of cyber breaches. So I think a lot of people here know me. I really like this talk because this talk is me. I used to do prevention for a lot of years, AppSec, built companies. And about 5 years ago when I left my last role, I decided, we're doing something wrong. People get breached. And I moved to the other side, the side that gets called on a Friday night every other weekend to help prevent breaches, to respond to breaches. So this is what I do today. I have these two perspectives. I always say it's really interesting. When you're on the defending side, I used to be a pen tester, you come up with all these amazing attacks and techniques and help customers defend against them. But then when you're an incident responder, you see what people actually use. And you discover that half of these pen test techniques are like, oh, they're way too advanced for what actual attackers are using. So let's ask a question. How many people here had their home broken into in the last 3 years? Okay, a couple. In the last 10 years, a couple more, 10 years. Yeah, still not a lot. I would ask this about a breach, but I don't want to put the whole room uncomfortable, right? And the reason that we don't get a lot of home breaches or even bank breaches is not because of the amazing lock or security. It's because our main control against it is deterrence, as long as you lived in a normal country, right? And so deterrence is people are afraid of going to jail. There's a system around it. It doesn't mean that it's the only control, but the lock on your door is not supposed to prevent a really, really determined attacker. It's, just supposed to prevent the delinquents of the society from getting into your home. And so if we look at numbers, right, this is US numbers. This is how much we spend as a society in the US on police, corrections, courts, and how much we spend on security, right? That's a way less than the deterrence. And so deterrence, $260 billion in the US every year. That's 1.4% of their GDP or 5% of the budget of the US government. Keep that in mind because we'll talk about how much companies spend on that. And that's deterrence, right? Security is a lot less, but we don't need it because we have deterrence. But in cyberland, there is no sheriff. Why? Because the attackers come from countries that don't care or actually encourage this, right? And so we see attacks from Korea, from Russia, from China, from countries that either don't prevent attackers from doing this or turn a blind eye, take bribe, whatever is the reason. And for the first time in history of mankind, we are at a point of singularity where commercial organizations need to fight state-supported or ignored criminal organizations on their own with no deterrence. We've never been in this situation, right? Countries have fought each other, it's a war, but organizations have always had the protection to some degree of the state, which we don't have today. What we have, the cyber programs that the countries are doing, it's nice, but it's at the edges. And so that puts us in this really crazy position. And now, if you look at the US, right? Deterrence, 5% of budget. How much do we spend on security when we have no deterrence? Nothing. We're spending between 0.2 to 0.9% of companies' revenue. So, anything between 20% to 50% over that of budget, depending on profitability. That's very, very low. And as a result, you'd be shocked to hear we're not doing a really good job, right? So we're failing. We're failing all the time, and we'll continue to fail. And why will we continue to fail? Because it's a problem that cannot be solved without deterrence. I mean, even with deterrence, there's some crime, right? But it's on the edges. But with no deterrence, either we, take our budget 10 times more to secure our systems, which, crumbles our economy, or we have to assume we live with this. And so my take, and that's why I started Mitiga, was, okay, we have to start assume we live with that. And if we live with that, we need to think about things differently. So I want to talk a little bit about statistics. Hopefully you all know that, but we'll still have them in place. So the average cost of a cyber breach is $4.5 million. That's last year's data. It gradually climbs year after year. It was about 5% lower the year before. It's consistently growing. I will talk about impact factors in a minute. The average time to identify and contain a data breach is 277 days. This is an amazing number, which doesn't change for years. It's around 270. It goes up a few days, down a few days for years now with IBM's data breach. So from the first day initial reconnaissance started on your site until this broke out, it's average 200 days and then another 70 days to contain. And the number above, the $4.5 million, is directly tied to that. So long breaches cost money, and this doesn't change. And this doesn't change because we're not doing anything to change it as an industry. So we talked about that. And then what we're also seeing, and that's going to relate to that, is that 82% of the breaches last year were already in the cloud, right? And so cloud breaches are ramping up quickly. So the year before it was 45%. Now it's 82. I guess this year it's going to be over 90. Can't double again because we can only get close to 100. But the attackers are now in the cloud, and that has another impact on breaches. So, if anybody here ever did a course in cybersecurity, we're being taught that risk is probability and impact. And as an industry, we've been working really, really hard on reducing the probability, right? We do all these posture management and prevention and detection and alerting and all that, all in an attempt to reduce probability. And whenever you talk to a CISO or a CEO, it's like, I want to make sure we never have another breach. I want to make sure we don't get attacked. We're all focused on probability. The vast majority of money spent in our industry is on reducing probability. And how are we doing? Not great, because we still get breached. Everybody gets breached, right? And so one of the interesting things that you see in the IBM report is that after a breach, organizations tend to increase their budget, right? So over 50% of organizations increase their budget on security. They're spending on security after a major breach. Does that mean that after that they are less likely to get breached? No. So the IBM cost of data breach looks at actual breaches they investigated, right? So out of this, 83% of the breaches they investigated wasn't the first breach for an organization, right? So they already had a breach, now they have another one. I'll give you a hint, they'll have another one and another one, because we can't prevent those because we have no deterrence and our security is not good enough, right? And so it means we need to start looking at this differently. If we want to reduce risk and we can't really solve the probability problem, we need to start thinking about solving the impact problem, which nobody talks about. Why? Because it's not cool. Why not cool? I'd much rather lie to myself and say, oh, we're doing all this work so we don't have a breach, sounds much better than, oh, I'm doing all this work, so when a breach happens, it's not so painful. It's what we need to do, but it's a hard story to tell ourselves. So let's look a little bit at impact factors, because now if we understand impact factors, we can start thinking on how to change them. So I chose out of the report about 6, increased impact factor and reduced impact factor. So geography. This is really interesting. Some geographies tend to have higher impact in numbers. Why? Part of it is types of business. Part of it is legal aspects, right? The US is way more legal heavy than other spaces. So the US is the highest. So impact in the US is more than double on average than impact in other areas. Middle East also have high impact, which surprised me. And then verticals, what you expect, healthcare and financial services. You can't do much about it. It's not like you can control this impact. If you're in financial services, you are financial services, but it means you need to be aware of that and take this into your impact calculations. The single most consistent factor is time to contain. So remember, 277. There are a lot of controls I'll talk about. They all map to this eventually. If you detect breaches faster, if you respond to them faster, the impact goes down. It goes down, could go down by a lot, could go down on average to a half if you combine those things. So time to contain, and then security systems complexity increases your impact. So I know we all like always the best of breed, always this thing, always that thing. But when you have too many security systems that are complex and hard to manage, during a breach, that goes against you. If you have simple infrastructure that you know how to operate, that goes to improve your impact. Security skills shortage, we all know that. You have to solve that. Now, it's hard to solve. You're not going to fill all your recs, right? Because that's the reality. So you have to solve that by getting support, outsource, teams, people that can help you during a crisis. And then migrating to the cloud. And the reason that migrating to the cloud increases impact is not because the cloud is more or less dangerous. It's because there's more skill shortage there. There's more complexity there because it's new and we still haven't figured out how to do it right. And so we just don't have the tools. Oh, sorry. So what helps reduce impact? So for many years, the top thing that helped reduce impact, I know it's going to be surprising, but it's being ready for IR, right? So having an IR plan, IR team, testing your IR, actually making sure that I heard this thing a few days ago. We were planning something with a customer and said, we want to do the IR test, but let's not do it on a Thursday because a lot of people are not there on the Thursday. It's like, okay, we should do it on a Thursday because that's the real world scenario. Incidents always start on weekends, on Thursdays, on holidays, because the attackers know the same thing. Everybody is on a holiday. That's the good time to attack you. You're not ready. You won't function at your best, right? So IR. This year, for the first time, DevSecOps approach has been the single most impactful impact reduction space. And why is that? Because as more breaches move to the cloud, then DevSecOps are the people who can help recover, and that influences the time to recover in the cloud. And so having a good DevSecOps approach, huge, 33% difference between organizations that had it and didn't have it. And then reduction of mean time to contain, we talked about it, and employee training. And why employee training? Because a lot of the breaches, I didn't get it in this talk into this, but a lot of breaches happen because of identity theft. Compromised credentials, phishing is still the single most common way to get in. And employee training, to some extent, helps. To some. It's still not going to solve it, but it helps. So despite all of that, we still lag behind on response. So, we understand that, we see that, the reports are out. IBM's been releasing those papers for 18 years now. But as an industry, we still spend more on prevention, posture, detection than recover and respond. And this is from a Gartner study. They showed that the biggest gap between the average maturity and the desired maturity of CISOs is in recover and respond. So when you look, if I go back to this slide, when you look at increasing budget reduces, well, not probability, but impact, you see that most budget increase that occurs after a breach is around impact reduction, response, employee training, IR plan and testing, detection and response technologies, right? They're not adding firewalls here because they had a breach. They're not adding another posture service. They're adding the things that help reduce the impact of the next breach, which is what you should do if you had a breach. But even better, you should do it before you had a breach. One last thing, I'll skip that because we don't have too much time. So we talked about the cloud. I mentioned this data breach in the cloud. This is 2022, 45%. 2023, 82%. This is a huge gap, jump. Why? Because attackers have gone to the cloud. Now some people might be surprised, right? We've been moving to the cloud for years. Unlike what people think, hackers are not the coolest, most advanced experts that employ the best techniques. No, they are behind the industry. They go where the massive is and where it's easy. And so the cloud era of breaches is here. And what we see is that cloud breaches are more expensive and harder to detect, harder to respond to, and generally take longer to contain. So if you look at these, you see the cloud ones are 290 and higher than the average because they're harder to detect. So if you're moving to the cloud, and it's not an if, you need to think about IR plan and IR testing in the cloud. Of course, I'm biased, but there's a reason for that. And what we see is that response in the cloud is different. It's not what you're used to. So if you go talk to your SOC and say, well, you now need to take care of the cloud, they're like, we don't have the right tools. We don't have the right skills. There's scale issues, expertise issues that you all need to take into consideration. So one last thing. What about AI? A lot of people ask me about AI. And so if you saw, AI around threat detection was one of the areas that helps reduce impact because it helps detect earlier. And so for now, we see there is a positive impact for AI, specifically around detection and response. Detection and response, SOC work, very difficult, very challenging, very mundane and repetitive and large volumes. AI can help there. And we're already seeing there are millions of startups in this space. Obviously, we're using AI. Everybody in this space is using AI, and it's helpful. And there are some data points from the FBI claim that it helps and it favors defenders at this point. Part of it is because we see a substantial investment by vendors and enterprises. However, and that's why I'm saying the jury is still out, we are seeing AI being used by attackers. And if you remember what I said 2 minutes ago, attackers are usually behind, not in front. So what we see right now in terms of what attackers are using, it's not very, very impressive, right? Oh yeah, they're letting ChatGPT write better phishing email, or letting ChatGPT run through inbox and business email compromises. They're still not really, really doing a good job. But I think once they do, we are facing another risk, because breaches, attacks are about asymmetry. The attackers only need something. We need to always be perfect, right? And so AI helps to magnify everything and also the asymmetry. So that could help them. And I think, in a few years, as this technology becomes more mainstream, better adopted by attackers, we'll see more. I still remember your talk about bots attacking bots from a few years ago. We're still not here, but we're getting there. So yeah, so thank you. I think for me, what I hope everybody takes away from this is this thinking: we can't win from an economic stand. We can't win from an investment stand in preventing breaches. We have to learn to live with them. We have to learn to manage them. And if we do that and we reduce the impact, then we don't have to become one of those headlines in many's next year's talk about liability. Thank you.